Let's move on to another hire today that was also in the discussion for the offensive coordinator position in Charles London. He was hired as the pass game coordinator and quarterbacks coach, so basically kind of taking the role that Tim Kelly was in last year as well, becoming the quarterbacks coach. He previously served as the Falcons QB coach and was the offensive coordinator in the Senior Bowl last week for Team America, in which they lost 27-10. Couple other things on his resume here. He previously served as the running backs coach for Chicago and as well as Houston, where Mike Vrabel was. So that is the connection there.
Yeah, I gave the Charles London hire an A on my initial grades of today's slew of hires. And it's because, well, first of all, Charles London was one of the main guys that we were anticipating could be. It was down to him and the Kansas City duo and Tim Kelly as the candidates for this offensive coordinator role. So I'm glad the Titans ended up bringing him in this capacity. I think that he'll be a benefit for this team. He is one of those guys in this slew of hires that was brought in from the outside. So a fresh voice, a fresh perspective in the room that I think will be beneficial. And the reason primarily behind the A grade that I gave this hire is that Charles London is clearly a bright guy, in my opinion, based on the fact that he's garnered the attention of a number of top head coaches around the league in recent years and gotten interviews for different jobs with teams that have recently won Super Bowls, like the Rams. So I think that if other coaches around the league, including Mike Vrabel and including the people who run the Senior Bowl, think that he's a guy that is an up-and-comer and a young, bright mind that deserves a chance in the NFL, the fact that the Titans got him on the staff, even without making him one of the coordinators, that's a win. I think that that's an A hire for sure.
Next up here, someone who kind of has been a mixed reaction hire for the Titans today is Jason Houtling, promoted to the offensive line coach for the Titans. He joined the team and served as an offensive line assistant last year, and he spent 14 seasons before that in college coaching, including 5 years as the head coach at Wagner, as well as a bunch of others serving as offensive line coach and offensive coordinator.
Yeah, so my initial reaction to these hires included a D grade for Jason Houtling, simply because, well, first of all, I think it's the worst hire of this bunch. But that's a result of not having evidence against Houtling necessarily, but him not seeming to me to be the right man for the job for a couple of reasons. Now, to be fair, in Mike Vrabel's press conference a couple of minutes ago, he said that his interview with Jason Houtling for this job was the best that he'd had in the past 5 years. So while my opinion on this hire it's a poor one, I'm happy to be proven wrong by a guy that has relatively little NFL experience this season. And listen, great offensive and defensive minds in the NFL have to get their start somewhere. They have to come out of nowhere at some point in their career. So while I'm not sure he's the right hire for the job, clearly Mike Vrabel thinks that he is. We will see. That will bear itself out this year. The reason I'm not crazy about this hire is, first of all, he's essentially Keith Carter Jr. Like, he was the assistant guy for Keith Carter, who I have defended as a good coach. He got a job with the Jets, a promotion, really. So, like, clearly the NFL thinks he's a good coach. But not only was he Keith Carter Jr., who wasn't vibing clearly here at the end of his run in Tennessee with the offensive line staff and offensive line players, I also don't really understand, with the offensive line being the number one by a long shot position that the Titans have to address this year and have to get a whole heck of a lot better this year. Why would you make that the position in which you hire the least qualified guy on your staff now, or at least of this batch of hires today? Very little NFL experience relative to a lot of these guys. He served as an offensive line assistant last year for an offensive line that was terrible. So I don't understand, at the position where you need the most improvement as soon as humanly possible, like this year, why are you hiring a guy that, doesn't have a great track record? I don't really get that. It's a confusing hire to me. Maybe I'll be proven wrong.
Moving on, let's get to a couple of quick hit guys in this seemingly Titans coach Tetris that they played today. A lot of guys moving around and other people taking each other's jobs.
Yeah.
And whatnot. We'll move on here to Tony Dews, who was moved to the tight end coach position, in which he previously served as the running backs coach since all the way back to 2018. Besides
Yeah.
that, Dude's also spent 20 seasons coaching in the college ranks, including 10 seasons coaching wide receivers and tight ends. So he does have experience at this position.
Yeah, Deuce has clearly been around the block. I think this is a C plus, B minus hire. He has been the guy coaching Derrick Henry, not just primarily, but really kind of as a private coach in recent years. Most practices and at camp in the summer, he's off working with Henry exclusively during a lot of the practice. So he's been Henry's guy. So I wonder what his opinion is on having his guy taken away from him. And now the running back coach position is the only position that a major, position coach job on this roster of Mike Vrabel's that he still has yet to fill at this point. So they are about 95% filled. As far as I know, this is the only big job now needing to be filled. He's going to remain in the building, shift over to the tight ends coach, kind of take the job from Tim Kelly, who Mike Vrabel explained when he was asked today about what Tim Kelly's role really was last year, gave kind of a pseudo answer saying that he was handling a lot of the first and second down passing game responsibilities, which is hilarious because they don't really pass a lot on first and second down. So I'm not sure what maybe he just had all these ideas each and every week and was disappointed on game day when they just ignored all of his plans from the week. But he was in practices during the week, spending a lot of time with tight ends and essentially being a tight end assistant coach. He now is the offensive coordinator, won't be able to do that anymore. So Tony Dews moves over from running backs coach to tight ends, is going to focus on those guys. And, 10 seasons coaching tight ends in the college ranks. Clearly he knows a thing or two about playing the tight end position and coaching them up. So I think it's a good hire.
Moving on, let's talk about Pat O'Hara, who previously served as the QB coach since 2018. He is now moving to a passing game analyst position, making room for the Charles London hire.
Yeah, not a lot to say on Pat O'Hara, another guy that's been around the block with the Titans for a couple of years now. I think it's another C plus hire. Not inspiring to say the very least. A guy that is clearly a Vrabel guy. He's kept him around and has shuffled him around. And he's moved into a position on the coaching staff that with the Titans is famously ambiguous and vague. Passing game analyst. What that means, your guess is as good as mine. And we probably, knowing the Titans, will never find out what exactly his job is. But not a whole lot to say. He's a meh hire.
Next up here, Luke Steckel will be joining the team in a different role now as the run game analyst. He's been with the team all the way back since 2013, but most recently served as the tight ends coach in 2021 and 22.
Yeah, so funny enough, I kind of have a relationship with his dad, which dates back to when I was delivering pizzas in high school. He came in to our pizza shop, and I noticed the big fat ring on his finger that looked like a championship ring, and I was like, "What is that?" And he was like, "Oh, my name is Coach Steckel. I was the offensive coordinator for the Titans. I believe he was the OC." When they went to the Super Bowl back in 2000, he was wearing his AFC championship ring, which was sick. And then he kept coming in, and I just kind of fostered a relationship with him. He actually came to in a past life. JT and I went to Belmont as music majors. So that's crazy. It's been years since then. But he actually came to one of our performances. So we kind of had a relationship there for a while. He was in the NFL forever. His son, now in the NFL, coaching for the Titans, is a guy that actually, was it last week that it was reported he was getting coordinator hires out west with the Chargers? Or it was one of the California teams that he'd been getting coordinator interviews with, which was kind of surprising to many because he wasn't a guy that was seen on this team's roster of coaches as an up-and-comer necessarily. Once again, another internal guy, clearly a Vrabel guy because he's keeping him around. A C plus hire.
Next up here, someone who we talked about on Monday's show, and which was already announced by the Titans this weekend, is Locust, who is joining the team as a defensive analyst, mostly having to do with the linebacking core.
Yeah, so Lori Locust, it was actually, we got that wrong earlier, JT. I don't know if we actually said that or not. It was announced by her and her agent. The Titans didn't announce it until today, but Lori Locust, she goes by Lo on Twitter, at least. I'm sure in person she does as well. She was hired by the Titans this past weekend, announced today, and Mike Vrabel in his press conference today mentioned that in speaking with her and interviewing her during the Senior Bowl, he was really, really floored by her technical knowledge of the game, and the way that she talked about the game and what she would do as a coach. So I think that she's another A hire, A minus hire. We talked a lot about her in a previous episode if you want to go back and listen to more thoughts on that, but really like bringing her in as yet another outside voice to bring some new perspective to this team.
Another new hire has to be Justin Hamilton here, who also comes in as a defensive analyst. He joins the team after 11 seasons coaching in college, including 2 seasons as the defensive coordinator at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I give this a B plus, A minus hire as well. Once again, because he's going to be working alongside Lori Locust and others as a defensive analyst and quality control guy, and he's an outside voice. That's what we've been asking for the Titans to bring in. Mike Vrabel brought in a group of 3 of those people in today's batch of hirings, and he seems to have a really fantastic track record in the college ranks. We'll see if it transitions into the NFL, but I really like the hire simply because he's an outside voice.
Rounding out the hires here today, let's talk about one who maybe is right below Tim Kelly in importance on this roster here of new hires. It has to be Chris Harris, who is now officially hired as the defensive pass game coordinator as well as the cornerbacks coach. He has 17 years of NFL experience, 9 as a coach and 8 as a player. And barring a backdoor exit here, as he is interviewing for the Houston Texans defensive coordinator job.
We don't know. It's reported that the Texans are interested, but we don't know if he's taken the interview or not.
He's lost out on the 49ers job, who hired someone else and went into a different direction earlier
Steve
today.
Wilkes, by the way.
Steve Wilkes.
Total side notes. Really happy for him. He's the guy that, if you don't know, coached up the Carolina Panthers as the interim coach this year. Many thought that he deserved that job. They went with Frank Reich. I'm glad he gets a landing spot out there as a coordinator on a team that defensive coordinators have had a really nice track record of excelling and getting head coaching jobs coming out of San Fran. So very happy for him. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're good. And Chris Harris looks like the main point here is that Chris Harris is here to stay.
Yeah, so it looks like he is. This one is another great hire. I said they hired 3 outside guys today. I guess it's 4 if Chris Harris is officially here, right? Or no, actually, he makes up the 3rd. So never mind. It's 3. He's the 3rd. It looks like he's going to stay. I know we've had like 2 or 3 weeks now of flux of whether or not Chris Harris is going to be here. Is he actually hired? Has the team announced it? They've announced it, which is seemingly a very good step in the direction of he's going to be here. The only loose end that hasn't been tied up is whether or not he's still interviewing for that Texans DC job. We don't know whether or not he's being allowed to have the interview. Legally speaking, according to the rules, I believe that he is. We don't know if he's had it or not. Perhaps he's already had it, and the Texans have told him that they're going to go another direction. Perhaps he's declined the interview and decided he wants to stay in Nashville. Whatever the case, it seems like there's at the very least 95% chance that he is staying here in Nashville. So thank you, JT, for helping us wrap up all of those hires and collecting some thoughts on each of those folks, giving us a little bit of background. Before we go and look at that, we actually have kept it short. I'm so proud of myself for once. I just have a couple of thoughts kind of to wrap up here before we get out. The first is this. So Lucas Panzica over at 104.5, he pointed this out on Twitter, and I thought it was a good way of encapsulating today's hires and the results of this hiring cycle for the Titans from a coaching perspective. As the dust settles, heading into next season, the Titans are going to have 9 different assistant coaches that are either new to the staff or working in new roles on the staff. 4 of them are new. So actually, I was wrong. There are 4, and 5 of them are switching their job descriptions. It's certainly the most coaching staff turnover in the Mike Vrabel era. And listen, ultimately on paper, that should be the kind of thing that fans and media alike look at and say, okay, so there are some changes being made here. I don't know how you can square 9 new assistant coaches with the idea that, oh, well, since Tim Kelly's the OC and Mike Vrabel's still the head coach, things are just going to be the same old going into next season, at least from an offensive standpoint. I don't see that. I think that everything that they've done in their hires, as well as everything that they've said in their media availability, points to this team changing a lot still. The other thing that's important to point out is that I don't think any of this is going to matter at the end of the day if the Titans don't get better players. All of this fighting and chaos surrounding the hiring news today, people being upset, some being pleased, none of it's going to matter if the Titans don't spend this offseason getting their roster into much, much, much better shape than it was in 2022. There is no coordinator in the world that succeeds ultimately in getting them to the finish line with the toolbox of players that they had at their disposal down the stretch in 2022. It just doesn't happen. And so what they ultimately have to do this offseason is improve this roster dramatically. And then these coaching hires are going to matter in the grand scheme of winning a Super Bowl. So enter Ran Carthon. That's what he's going to have to do. And it's what this team and what fans and media really should be focused on. And I understand we're focused on the news of the day, but going through the offseason, the focus should be, and ultimately it will be, because the players are what really turn out the ratings and get people's attention, should be focused on who this team brings in to play football and to be coached by these new coaches. They can't coach guys to success if the roster stinks. So Ran Carthon is going to have a big role in that. Speaking of Ran Carthon and the roster, important note, kind of a side note from the press conference with Mike Vrabel today. He said when asked about what the OC hire means for Ryan Tannehill, he said, quote, "I don't think anything. I talked to Ryan. I let him know which direction we were headed. I don't want to speak for him, but he sounds excited." And then he added that Tannehill's been in the building almost every single day. That he didn't say since when, but it sounds like Tannehill's been very present with the Titans this offseason, and it sounds like he and Mike Vrabel and Ran Carthon have been in communication a good bit. And Mike added at the end of that he and Carthon continue to evaluate the entire roster, which includes the quarterback position and Ryan Tannehill. But as we've been saying all offseason, JT, and as I said this exact month last offseason, despite many saying that I was foolish and wrong, Ryan Tannehill is going to be the quarterback of this team going into 2023. I think that there's a 97.6% chance that he, barring him tearing his ACL skiing this offseason or the Titans changing their mind dramatically and falling in love with one of these young quarterbacks and deciding to sell the farm. I don't see that happening at all, but it's not impossible. There's a very, 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 very strong chance, to the point that I'm comfortable saying he is going to be the quarterback at least through the next season for this team. So get used to it. Get over it. Like there's a lot of things that this team can do outside of getting a new quarterback. And as I've argued for a couple of weeks now, things that this team should do this offseason, instead of changing their quarterback room, that can make this team dramatically better this year. And so that's what they're going to have to focus on, because I think that Ryan Tannehill is the plan going forward. My last point, JT, is this. Reflecting on the results of today and the chaos that has ensued online and in the fan base and in the media, what sticks out to me from a 10,000 foot perspective is that this is an inflection point in the Mike Vrabel era, in his tenure as the head coach for the Titans. We've seen one of these by my estimation so far, only one. This is the second one. And it's a sink or swim moment for Vrabel. It's the kind of thing, this hiring cycle for him and how he chooses to go into next season philosophically is an inflection point in his career that if he sinks, I think will ultimately lose him the confidence of a lot of fans and media and probably of his bosses. But if he swims, it's just going to further bolster the idea that, yeah, Mike Vrabel is one of the best coaches in the league. And he knows what he's doing. And a lot of times he's smarter than the average fan yelling at him on Twitter. The first time we saw an inflection point like this for him, which I think is important to point out, the only other time we've had this kind of weight and gravity behind an offseason change that he's made, or lack of change in this case, is when he chose to stick by Shane Bowen as the DC after the 2020 season, in which the Titans defense was abysmal. He was essentially that offseason blaming the personnel for a lot of their woes in 2022 or 2020 rather, and charging John Robinson at the time in the front office to go and get him better players to coach. And they did that. And then they had one of the best, most ferocious defenses in the league the next 2 years. He was proven right. He blamed the shortcomings primarily on personnel. That gamble paid off, despite many being furious at him in the offseason and saying that they'd lost confidence in him as the coach and saying that this was the kind of thing that'll get him fired. And in the end, he was right. Now, he needs to be right this time, too. You can't go 50% on these big inflection points. But if his track record has anything to say for the kind of offseason wisdom needed to navigate a ship through treacherous waters or to make big decisions like this that have dramatic ramifications, Mike Vrabel seems to be the kind of guy for the job. He has my faith in him as the head coach of this team until otherwise proven wrong. And I don't think that today's actions prove me wrong in believing that he knows what he's doing at all. So